And we'll get going. So welcome to today's webinar on the Little Learners Assessment of Reading Skills, which we refer to as the LLARS. My name's Alex Harper. I'm the publisher here at Little Learners Level Literacy, and I look forward to giving you a walkthrough through our formal assessment tool for reading today and to answer any of your questions best I can. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which I'm presenting from today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend those respects to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Island peoples joining us today. And just a little bit of admin, I've placed everybody on mute and ask that you please stay on mute throughout the presentation, which will last about 25 minutes. And then we can have a chance to chat and ask questions. So when we get to that point, unmute yourself and hit me with all your questions. Or alternatively, you can email us afterwards with anything that occurs to you after the webinar today. And we'd be delighted to get back to you on that and help you out and get the LLARS going in your school or context. And I'll be recording the presentation and mailing it to anyone who's registered for this webinar. So you'll get that email probably tomorrow with the recording and the links to the LLARS. All right. So let's start by asking, why do we assess reading? And why should we assess using the LLARS? So this is the most crucial question we should be asking ourselves every time we assess children. Why are we doing it? What do we want to understand from it? And especially if you're using some benchmarking kits at the moment, you might want to ask yourself, what do those levels really mean? How do they link to and inform your teaching? And how do they help each of your students along? And if you're teaching with Little Learners Level Literacy at the moment, or another high quality systematic synthetic phonics or structured literacy program, I think we can agree that you really want to be assessing if children have learned exactly what you've explicitly been teaching them in that program, and even better, that they've mastered it. So we feel so strongly that your assessment should be matching your instruction that we make the LLARS freely available to download, and I'll make sure you get the link to that in the follow-up email with the recording. And it's super easy to find on our website as well. You just go there and it's on the assessment part of the straw. But aside from knowing that we need to assess what we've specifically taught as part of our explicit teaching approach, we also might assess to make data-informed decisions and plans, inform plans for next term's teaching, including provision for differentiation within your class, reveal gaps in student knowledge, and identify the precise areas for extra support via Tier 2 daily small group interventions using the Little Learners Reading and Spelling program, or whatever program you're using. Also demonstrates evidence of mastery and of student progress for colleagues, school leaders, parents and carers. It can be really useful to have a record showing this progress. And lastly, perhaps you might use the reading assessment data to organise learning groups. So the Little Learners programme supports whole class teaching of phonics, and that's where we're at. The LLARS identifies where students may need help to catch up as you are teaching this programme to the whole class, which keeps the class together and progressing through the sequence together. So this is our recommended implementation of the programme and of the assessment resource. But if you have a really strong whole school commitment to phonics and sufficient resources to do so, you might wish to organise your students into needs-based groups. You can use the phonics assessments to do this, organising students into groups of similar ability and knowledge. But those needs-based groups must be fluid. So it's a good idea to reassess students at least once or twice per term if you are using this approach. So you've got to assess a bit more regularly to readjust those groups as required, which is more assessment than you might do with a whole class approach. So what we've done is we built the LLARS, or the Little Learners Assessment of Reading Skills, to meet those needs. So what it aims to do is to assess and monitor students' skills, inform your teaching, identify in diagnostic detail the specific needs of each student, demonstrate what students know and to what level they can apply that. So how much do they know and how much can they apply that in their skills that they've learned? And provide a formal assessment and ongoing record of the skills achieved. So I guess just a little bit of a health warning on this. A phonics assessment will be doing this for you. And a literacy benchmarking assessment kit will not be assessing this type of knowledge and these skills. So it's up to your school and as part of your implementation, if you want to continue using these benchmarking kits in foundation, if you're taking on the LLARS. But just be aware that reading assessments like this will be checking students' knowledge from a balanced literacy perspective. So they might include words and strategies that are not aligned to this approach and this synthetic phonics instruction that Little Learners provide. So we don't really recommend that, but the question comes up a lot, so I just wanted to address it. So back to the LLARS. So next, let's have a look at where the LLARS fits into our teaching approach, and then we'll get stuck into the content of it and how you will run the assessment. So this is the Little Learners Love Literacy explicit teaching routine. So revise, teach, practice, apply, and assess. So Little Learners Love Literacy uses these principles to explicitly teach children in the classroom. Same sequence, but just some of our resources against here so you can see how we do this. Now, of course, assessment in the form of checking for understanding from non-volunteers during your explicit lessons naturally takes place while you're using the program. But there is a role for a more formal assessment tool, and this is where the LLARS comes in. So apologies. This is our formal assessment tool used to monitor progress and establish learning pathways at certain points during the school year. So we're revising every day using the speed, sense and chance. We're teaching the new content, using our teacher resources, practicing, and then we're applying with decodable books, and the assessment fits in there. So we're doing check for understanding and informal assessment every day, but those formal assessments are taking place a couple of times a year to check in and to readjust our planning. So when to assess, just answered that. So we're going to assess at least twice during the school year, so ideally mid-year and at the end of the year. So you do your first LLARS. If you're starting to use the Little Learners Assessment of Reading Skills from foundation from scratch, then you would use it after you've taught stages 1 to 4 of the program and not before that point. So when we've got the simple code, the simple alphabetic code, and children have been learning CVC words, after that point, after stages 1 to 4, that you would check in with the LLARS. And then you do it again at the end of the year so that the prep students can go up into year 1 with a solid set of data. If you're starting to use the program for the first time mid-year, or you're starting to use it just from year 1, then you'll need to do the assessment first to inform your starting point for teaching. So the content of the LLARS. So there are 4 subtests within the LLARS. The first one is the grapheme phoneme knowledge subtest. So this is assessing children's knowledge of the 44 sounds of English, of our alphabetic code. The second subtest is the single word reading or word decoding test. And this is testing children's ability to apply their phoneme grapheme knowledge to decode 1 and 2 syllable words. And we have 2 parts to this subtest, and we have a real words assessment and a non-words assessment. And we'll come back to this. You can use one or the other, or you can use both of them. It's entirely up to you. The third test is assessing children's knowledge and ability to automatically read 15 sight words that are necessary for reading connected text. And in our program, we call those heart words. And we're just assessing the heart words for stages 1, 2, 3, and 4, where it's really essential that children have that knowledge. And then the final subtest is probably quite a meaty one when we get into the details of running it and marking it, is reading short connected text. So we have unseen decodable stories for the 7 stages of Little Learners Love Literacy. And these also check fluency, reading behaviours and comprehension in terms of the basic understanding of the content and the characters in each story that they read. So that one should be quite familiar in terms of how we run it. It's quite similar to a running record, and we get some really rich data from that. Out of all of these subtests, if you're ever really pushed for time and you just have to do one, I'd say the second one, single word decoding, is the most quick and informative part of this assessment. Ideally, you obviously do everything, and then you get a very robust data set to work with. But the single word decoding is so informative. You can get a really good idea there of how much children have mastered the 44 sounds, and also the phoneme grapheme correspondences and how well they can apply them to reading. Okay, so each subtest that I've just shown you on the last screen is organised by a Little Learners of Literacy stage, which you can find out more about by downloading it from our website, or you could also attend the Little Learners intro webinar, where we really we dig into the teaching sequence, and we pick away at it and have a look at why we have things in this order, and how the program runs around it. So the stages run across Foundation and Year 1 and allow for gradual and logical explicit teaching of the alphabetic code and morphology needed for reading and spelling. So we're covering off the most common phoneme grapheme correspondences in this sequence to allow children to unlock and read and spell more words at a faster rate. So just in a summary, in terms of organising the assessment, the LLARS is administered individually. So, and ideally, that would be across 2 sessions, twice a year. So the first session being the first 3 subtests, and then the second session being the unseen texts, if you feel that children might need a break in between. And as I said earlier, twice a year. The testing environment should be quiet and free from distractions, of course, and students should be given appropriate thinking time for each comprehension question that you give them, and they can go back to the text to find their answers. And when reassessing or re-administering the LLARS test, we recommend that you begin at the level the student started to make errors at when you last assessed them. Okay, so if you're doing it twice a year, and children started to make errors in stage 3, and that's where you quit the assessment when you did it halfway through the year. That's where you'd pick up again at them when you do it the next time. So I hope that makes sense. And we use the same copy of the student record to record the results each time, so that we can build up that data. So we're going to have a look at each subtest in more detail. We'll have a look at what's included and how you mark it. So hopefully by the time we've been through all 4 subtests, you'll get a good idea of how to get going with this in the classroom. So the first subtest is the phoneme grapheme knowledge assessment. This is what it looks like. So inside the LLARS manual, you'll get a version for the student, the one on the left-hand side, and then you'll have a version for you, which is the version I've shown you here on the right-hand side with space to write. So with this assessment, what you're asking children to do is to point to each grapheme and say the sound. They're grouped by the Little Learners stages in the corresponding coloured boxes, as you can see up there, and there's numbers in there for you as well. And we work on a discontinue rule with these assessments. So once children have made 3 errors within a stage, we stop. So I hope that's clear. We're testing basic phoneme grapheme correspondence knowledge here in isolation. So they're not applying it to reading words here. So this should be quite a quick subtest to do. And I'd say in those early stages, it's a really useful one for you to be doing, and quite quick to get through. So here, let's have a look at marking the first subtest. So here's the marking guidance. Students are going to use the same score sheet until they've completed the program. So for this reason, you might want to use a different coloured pen each time you assess. And we just love different coloured pens anyway. If they say the phoneme correctly, then you just tick it and give them 1 point per tick. So I hope that's straightforward. You might need to give them a prompt. If you do this and they get it correct, you tick it and just note it with a P. I think it's important to know what kind of prompts we're allowed to give here. They are quite restricted. A prompt would be something like using the mnemonic that you're using in the program. So it might be, what sound does Felix Frog make? Would be your prompt here. And they might go, Felix Frog. And they've got it correct with the prompt of the mnemonic, so you know that as a P. Okay. If it's incorrect, record the response that they gave you above the word. And if there's no response at all, put a dash across it. Of course, you would have given them a prompt by this point as well, so put a P and a dash. If you're in any doubt on how to say the sounds, just head to our YouTube channel, and we've got demonstrations of all of the sounds on there, and also of our chitter chatter chant mnemonics as well. So that's all there for you if you need that as a reference. And then you can transfer the marks from that subtest onto the summary sheet after the assessment's finished, along with any of your comments. And there's space there to record any subsequent marks if you're retesting. So that one's quite straightforward. Hopefully that makes sense. The second subtest is the single word decoding assessment. So let's get stuck into this one. As I said, I think this is the most useful and gritty part of the assessment. I think it will tell you a lot quite quickly. And as I said earlier, there are two parts to it, real words and non-words. And the non-words is new. We just released that this year. So we'll have a look at the real words one first. So children must apply their phoneme grapheme knowledge to decode one-syllable words and two-syllable words in this subtest. So what you're going to do, the student version is on the left-hand side there, just has the word lists on it, again, organised by stage. And then you've got a version with space to write next to and mark. So you fill in the student's details on your form, place the sheet in front of the child and ask them to put their finger under each word and tell you what it says. In this subtest, you're not going to correct students. If they don't respond, you can give them one prompt. And again, the prompts are quite restricted. So with this one, you'd just be asking them, can you sound out and blend it? Because that's what we want to know. And there's not much else that we can really give them as a prompt. And again, assess until the student makes 3 incorrect responses within the stage. So the second part of the subtest, as I said, children must apply that phoneme grapheme knowledge that they have to decode 1 and 2 syllable words that cannot be guessed. So these are non-words. They are not real words. They follow the rules of English, so English orthography, so they can be decoded. They're words like VIP, preet, wem, for example. And this is a really excellent test of children's ability to apply their alphabetic code knowledge, especially at those lower stages, when many of the decodable words, the CVC words, are also quite high frequency and common. So dog and cat and sun, for example. There is a chance that children might already know those and be able to guess. But we don't teach non-words. They're purely an assessment tool. And you just absolutely know with these words that children have never seen them before, and they've got to be able to apply their knowledge. So you can make a choice. You can do real words and non-words, or choose one or the other, entirely up to you. The pronunciations for the non-words are included in the manual for your reference as well. And it'd be handy for you to have those out the first few times you're using this check, just as a bit of support there. So marking it, let's have a look. So if they read the word automatically, so they read the first word map, you record a tick above the word on the form. If they decode the word, so they sound it out and blend it to read the word, that's also a tick and 1 point. And you just record a dot above each of those graphemes to show that they have been sounded out and blended correctly. So both of those are correct and totally fine within this assessment. So the incorrect responses, they might decode with errors. So it might look like this. They might, you record a dot in this case above each correct phoneme grapheme correspondence that they've got, and then note whatever they've got incorrect above it. They might also just have an incorrect response. So they might just have even perhaps guessed. In this example, it's definitely a guess. It's something totally different to what we've got written down on the page. In which case, write the word above. And if there's no response, you record a dash above it like you did in the previous assessment, the subtest number 1, and a prompt, because you will have prompted them by that point. So no points are scored for incorrect or prompted responses in this assessment. So they either read it automatically correctly or sound it out and blend it correctly. And if not, then you've got these other notations to use. So just an example here. I just flipped through that probably a bit quickly. This student has got all of stage 1 correct, and they needed a prompt for nod, but they got it right. And they needed a prompt for quiz. They got jut incorrect, and then no responses. We got 3 no responses in stage +4. So we stopped the assessment at that point. It's just a bit of an example for you. So that looks clear enough. In real life, the responses can be a little bit murkier, so we don't just always hear nothing or a random word or sounding it out and blending it correctly. So just some example responses here to just show you. So students might sound out and blend to read the word, but elongating that first sound, like app, map. That's fine. And they might elongate the first sound and then read the word really quickly afterwards. That's totally fine as well. And as we've said before, if they read it automatically, that's also correct. If they just sound it out and can't blend it together, that's not correct. So we don't give them any points for that. They've got to be able to blend them together to read the word. The phonic knowledge is no use to them if they can't do that skill. So at that point, they wouldn't get that correct. Again, we've come through some of these other examples. When they're sounding them out, there might be some common mistakes that happen, which might include making the word plural, that happens a bit, or confusing the initial, the vowel sound. So maybe confusing it with a long vowel, or maybe just confusing it with another short vowel, quite often happens, or a completely incorrect word, as we looked at before. Okay, so after that, we're going to add up the correct responses and pop the number of correct responses and prompts and note them on the second subtest table here, and you've got space for any comments there too. This is just a wee zoom in there to show you what that table looks like. So in our example here, in stage 1, the child has read 5 of the words correctly. They didn't sound out and blend any of them. They did it automatically, if you remember, and so they get 5 out of 5. So you've just got that ability there to see how automatic their reading is, and especially if you're reassessing, see how they're progressing with that skill. This is the non-words version, which runs in exactly the same way. You just know that children haven't seen this before and they have to apply that alphabetic code knowledge. And as I said, here's the pronunciation guide that you've got here. We give you it broken into the phonemes and give you a rhymes with as well, so just in case there's any confusion. Right, so that was our second subtest, reading single words. The third one is quite a quick one to do. It's our heart words assessment. So these are our heart words in the program. So heart words, so our decodable books use a small number of high frequency tricky words that are not yet decodable, but they're needed to construct sentences and continuous text. There might be words like said or one or the, or they might be words like my or her and are, as you can see on the screen here. So children need to be explicitly taught these and learn them off by heart to be able to read the books. Many of these words become decodable later in the program to children as they learn more and more of the alphabetic code. And we've got certain ways of teaching them. And we did used to have a subtest for all the stages 1 to 6 heart words. You can see there are quite a few words there. And we got feedback that it was just a bit too long to do. And we actually believe that really the core heart words they need to master are those 1 to 4. So that's why we've paired it back to 1 to 4. All right, so this is what it looks like, student version, teacher version again. And you're just going to ask for this subtest for children to put their finger under each word and tell you what it says. And scoring the items here. is quite straightforward, because they either get it right or they don't. Because they're not sounding out and blending these, they have to learn them by heart. So they either read them correctly and automatically, or they say something that's incorrect, and you will then note that above the word. Or if there's no response, a dash again. Pop that in the table that is down there, and the space for comments too. Alrighty, we're on to our last subtest. And this is the unseen text. So your phonics version of a running record, I guess. So your unseen decodable text, there's one for every stage. This is an example here. The student version is on the left-hand side, which is nicely set out with some illustrations and designed text. And your version looks a bit more serious. Exactly the same text and layout. You've got your heart words highlighted in red for you. And then there's a table to do your scoring and the comprehension questions under. We'll zoom in on these in a second and really have a good look at them. So there's one text for every stage in the Little Learners Love Literacy program, and there's a summary table which shows you the number of words, the target number of words that we're trying to get correct for mastery, and the heart words included too. Okay, so marking this. As I said, similar to a running record, really. So we've got our sheet in front of us, a tick for reading words automatically and correctly. And like with the single word reading subtest, sounding out and blending to read the word correctly is also a tick and a point when you're scoring up your totals, but you would just put the dots in to show that they sounded out and blended it. And then we have the incorrect responses. So again, it sounds out, but sounds out correctly, but doesn't blend to read the word, just have dots. Decodes with errors, so record a dot above each one they've got correct, and then note what they've said for the incorrect one here. And the example is a vowel confusion. Incorrect response, just pop that above the word so that you've got a record of what they read. And no response and prompt is the same as before as well, with a line and P. So you'll go through the whole story like that. And then this is what the score table looks like underneath for you. So I've enlarged that so we can just have a bit of an explore. Here you've got a place to put the dates, as you might go back and reassess that could be useful. And then you're going to have a look at totting up the scores. How many words did they read automatically? How many words did they read correctly by sounding out and blending? And what's that total looking like? So this child read 54 of the 59 words correctly. The target level for this text for mastery is 53. Have they reached it? Yes or no? Put it in the column. So this target level is always approximately 90%, and that's what we're looking for mastery. Then you've got space for your heart words. How many did they get correct out of 16? As you might recall, they are in red on your sheet, so you should see those pretty easily. And then we've got this column at the end, which is our reading behaviours, which is a teacher judgment. So what we're looking for here is for you to use your judgment to put either 1 tick, 2 ticks, or 3 ticks next to these behaviours that you've noticed. 1 tick being beginning to show these behaviours, 2 being progressing with these behaviours, and 3 being independently doing these behaviours. And the behaviours we're looking at are tracking words with the finger. So we really are looking at that. And when we do our small group reading with decodable books, we're encouraging that behaviour too. Decoding without prompting. So can you sound it out and blend it? Can you go back and sound it out and blend it? Rereading for meaning. Really important behaviour if they've been sounding out and blending as well. They might lose track of the meaning. So going back and rereading, really important behaviour, and then fluency as well. So while sounding out and blending is a key skill, ultimately require the student to read words with automaticity and to read a connected text with fluency. And what we mean by fluency is accuracy, pace, and intonation. So using the punctuation to intonate as they read. And it's only when students read with fluency that they can easily gain that meaning from the text without constantly having to reread passages. So it's really key to keep an eye on. And then we've got our comprehension questions. These are nothing to get too stressed out about. They're very straightforward questions, and they're just there to check that children have literally understood what they have read. And as you are starting to push up the level, the stages, and children are more challenged by decoding the words on the page, it is important to check in on whether they have understood what they have read or not. So these are just quick literal comprehension checks. So give them plenty of time for this. There's no kind of timed answer for it. And make a note of what their responses are down at the bottom of the page. And that's it. So let's have a look. There is a summary sheet. So that summary sheet's for each child to keep in their file throughout prep and year one. And it has a space for each of the stages and also for each of those subtests so that you can keep an eye on those total scores and a quick running through of the comments as well. So those individual comments on students' progress and what their targets are. So that's always there the next time you assess. So then you could log all of your classes' scores on the spreadsheet for an overall view of how they are all performing. And then it's up to you how you're going to use that data. So you can demonstrate students' mastery with it, of course. Are they meeting those target levels? Create individual targets for students. So you're seeing the types of errors they're making and at what stage they're getting stuck. So you're identifying those gaps in alphabetic code knowledge that they have, and identifying those developing skills as well that you could then go back and help reinforce. Look at trends, and if there are trends across your class, revise and reteach content if needed. And use the information that you're seeing in the spreadsheet across your class to create those tier 2 intervention groups, those short-term, daily, small group interventions, that extra top up to get children back up to speed. And also, of course, very vitally, find out where to begin with new students as well. So that is the LLARS. Please just unmute yourself and I'd be really happy to do my best to answer those. I think I just mentioned we have some more professional learning. So if you're looking, don't know why I did that. If you're looking to now find out more about the rest of the program or the decodable books or the phonological awareness assessment or the spelling assessment, we've got a heap of other webinars going on for those. So just register for them. We'd be really, really pleased to see you there. We also have workshops. So we have a 2-day workshop, which covers how to teach the program in foundation and year one with fidelity, I guess. So we go through the theory, science of reading, the latest research, as well as looking at practically using all of the materials in the classroom and how that all works, demo lessons, etc. So we're doing those we have been doing those online this year, of course. We'd usually do them face to face. We've got our term 1 dates up for next year, and we have tentatively penciled in a face-to-face, but we've got all of the onlines working as well. So do go check that out. We'd really recommend that if you want to really get underway with the program. Also worth a look is the YouTube channel. As I said before, the chitter chatter chants are all up there, but there's heaps of other stuff too, like how to use some of our spelling resources, how to use decodable books and parent videos on there. And also there is a recording of the intro webinar on there if you just want to go and have a look yourself. And join our Facebook group too. It's an exclusive one where you just have to request to join, and we've got a really nice community of teachers there who are using the program. So if you have questions, of course we answer from Little Learners too, but you can get the input of other people using the program too, which is just great to see and share those things. So do join us there too. So thanks for attending today. I hope you found it useful. Would appreciate any feedback. We'll send out a little link if you've got any feedback. Please spare a few minutes to share it with us, and we'd be really glad to receive that. And yeah, keep an eye on social media for more professional learning, and I hope to see you again at some point soon. Have a really lovely evening, everybody. Thank you very much.